All right, thanks everybody for coming. My name is Adam Furtado. I'm here with Kessel Run. Earlier today, we heard from Nick Shalon about how the Air Force's and the DoD's moved to software factories. I want to talk about everything else, everything that he didn't get a chance to talk about, all the things that makes us, we have to do in order to have a strong organization with our DevOps models going forward. Now, I want to preface by saying I'm not a technologist by trade. I don't know how to code. My master's degree is in international negotiation and conflict resolution. But I want to talk about my journey to get here, and for this talk, the journey is important. So when I graduated high school, I joined the Air Force. A month later, I got diverted in basic training to the United States Air Force Honor Guard, where I was molded to be a ceremonial guardsman. So there, I learned how to march and do these ceremonies for visiting dignitaries, presidential inaugurations. I also did over 2,000 funerals at Arlington National Cemetery, a few dozen of them active duty members of the Air Force. From there, I retrained, became a targeteer in the Air Force. I was enlisted. And my job here was to get deployed around the world and make decisions as an E5 of what weapon I wanted to use to get the effect I needed, what fusing, what effect that would have on our enemy and civilians. Then from there, I moved on, got out of the Air Force, and I found myself in the acquisitions community in the IT space. Then I was charged with delivering capability to those people that I once was. And I think what these things bring together and made me realize over time is what I don't have in the technical background, I bring in perspective. When I was in freezing cold temperatures or 100-degree heat, standing on the marks at a funeral, I didn't yet understand the complexities of war and the things that brought us there. And then when I was a targeteer and was deployed, I started to understand the complexities of war, but what I didn't understand was why I could text my wife on the way to work and scroll through Twitter, then put my phone into a box while walking to a skiff, and all of a sudden I was transported into 1974. And doing menial tasks like sharing a spreadsheet and emailing somebody took a lot of brain power and a lot of work to be able to do. Then I joined the acquisitions community, and I started to realize all the reasons why that was the case, right? I started to learn why it was so hard for me to get capabilities into users' hands. I realized why it's that we had 8.5-year IT cycle times for federal IT. I started to learn why 94% of federal IT projects were behind schedule, all over budget, and why 40% of them never delivered a single thing. I started to understand why that was the case, but what I couldn't understand, why I still don't understand, is why everybody seemed to be so okay with it. General Holmes from ACC posited that years of institutional risk aversion led us to the strategic dilemma plaguing us today, replacing our 30-year fleet on a 30-year timeline. And I like this quote because I had an optimistic bent to it as he continued. He said, that dilemma also provides us with an opportunity. And a few people a few years ago saw that opportunity, and that opportunity became Kessel Run in some form. There was a small group of people who were tired of doing things the way they were supposed to be done. We were tired of the bureaucratic hurdles keeping us from delivering capability to our users. Out of the 5 people who started Kessel Run, 3 of them came from operational or user backgrounds, and I don't think that's an accident. So from a historical perspective, Kessel Run was born out of a lot of things. It was a lot of the right people in the right places at the right time. It was a lot of serendipity, some fortuitous events. We had big successes. We had colossal failures. And all those things came together to build this organization that we are today. Over 1,000 people, an organic software development organization within the Air Force, continuously delivering capability into the field every single day. We hit a milestone recently that for the Air Operations Center that we're modernizing, we are delivering capability into the field every 11 hours on average, coming down from that 8.5-year timeline. So April 2017, a small group of people are out in San Francisco in a hotel or in a boardroom trying to decide what we're going to call this thing. We knew we needed to have a cool name. We had to brand. We had to get outside the bureaucracy to make this work. We came up with the name Kessel Run. This is the actual sticky of our dot vote. And for those of you who don't know, Kessel Run, famed smuggling route in Star Wars, and it felt perfect for us. It felt apropos, so we felt like we needed to smuggle this way of thinking and this way of working into the DoD. So it worked out for us. So this is my Agile Jesus picture. I love it. If you want to get a snapshot of it live and in person, you're welcome to. But it was a long way to get there, right? 2.5 years of hard work from a ton of people to get where we are now from a Kessel Run perspective. So what I want to talk about today are all the steps we had to take to challenge the bureaucracy where we needed, the challenges outside of just the technology that we had to kind of plow through. So my last 2.5 years have felt like I've been in the middle of a video game. I want to see if I can make this analogy work. All right, so you remember when you were a kid, you're playing video games and you start, at the first level. I was never very good, so I never had any thought that I was going to be able to beat a game. I just wanted to get through a level, right? So you start the level, you start going down through this level. There's barriers you have to jump over and obstacles you have to dodge around. And you die, you fall and plummet to your death a few times. You start over, you do it again. And you just get further and further every time you play the game until the end. You finally get to the end. There's probably this big boss there that you have to get through. Take a couple of tries to get through him. You finally get through, you jump on that flagpole, and you've tackled it. You've gotten through level 1, right? But your victory is short-lived, because after level 1 just comes level 2, and you're tackling something else. Everything that we felt like we were doing over the last couple of years felt like we were in continuous loop of having to tackle bureaucratic levels of things we had to deal with in order to get capability into our users. So I'm going to go through those here. So we are in September. It's fall now. We just got through the summer of software factories, right? And there are innovation efforts popping up all over the place. There are a lot of great people doing a lot of great work. There are a lot of organizations that look really similar to Kessel Run. Some of them look very different from Kessel Run, and it's all goodness. But what I want to go through are all the challenges that we had, so all these organizations who are trying to move faster and deliver capability don't have to go through the same struggles for some of the things that we went through. We're going to go beyond the software factory. I don't know if you guys recognize how long it took me to make these slides, but I want to make sure that it was worth it. Cool. Level 1. First thing we had to do, we had to have organizational self-awareness. If you take nothing out of this talk, please take this one. You have to know what your organization is capable of in every facet of every decision that you make. That could be technically, that could be from any other perspective. So one thing that Kessel Run did, we did a lot of things wrong. We screwed up a lot of things. We pissed off a bunch of people along the way. The one thing that we did right up front, we had organizational self-awareness. We knew what we were lacking, what we were capable of, and what we weren't capable of, more importantly. We knew that as a program office, deep in the belly of the beast in the world's largest bureaucracy in an ACAT-1 program office on Hanscom Air Force Base, we've been outsourcing all of our product work, our engineering for so long, we didn't have the ability in-house to be able to be the product organization that we wanted to be. So we went out and we got help. We went to industry and we tried to get help on figuring out what we need to do to change our culture to be more product-focused, what we need to do to make sure that we could deliver the way that we wanted to. And you can't get to your future state without first understanding your current state. You have to understand where you are in order to get to your target condition down the road. So that's what we did. We partnered with a company called Pivotal. We took active duty airmen, we tossed them in the middle of Silicon Valley, and we learned the ways that they are able to tackle problems. And it's very different from normal military culture. So we had to learn a lot of things along the way. But having organizational self-awareness allowed us to make decisions that ended up working out going forward. So that's your first coin. Take it home, organizational self-awareness. Level 2. The need for organizational self-awareness was never more prevalent than our technology decisions up front. We wanted to make sure that we could concentrate as much of our energy and our time and our brain power as possible to learn how to build a product organization, how to build the culture we needed, how to grow people, and all. So we wanted to do as much as we could to offload the amount of technical complexity up front so we can get things into the field quickly. The best technical solution isn't always the right one, okay? So we needed to make sure that when we made a technical decision up front, we did it in order to make sure that we were abstracting complexity as much as we could until we were ready to take on that added complexity to really evolve even further. We wanted to bring up the abstraction level as high as possible and in turn bring up the value line. We want to focus all of our effort and our energy on mission applications that supported the user and abstract and it below. So we went with Pivotal Cloud Foundry as our platform early on, provides a ton of opinionation and a ton of abstraction, things that engineers don't love. But we knew as an organization with organizational self-awareness, we we were seeking that out. We wanted that opinionation, that abstraction that allowed us to focus our efforts on growing our product organization first. Now, as we've evolved and grown and we've gotten bigger and more mature as an engineering organization, our platform now has other options. We do have some Kubernetes, we do have OpenShift options. We've also rolled our own services on our platform as well. So we've been able to grow there with that self-awareness early on, made sure we made a kind of good early decision. Dr. Eric Schmidt, chairman of the DIB, said the DoD doesn't have an innovation problem, it has an innovation adoption problem. The technology isn't important here, it's basically everything else. We wanted to make sure from a technical perspective, we were focused on continuous delivery above all other technical things. We wanted to make sure whatever we built got into our users' hands as fast as possible. We were continuously delivering value. So we figured out how to continuously deliver. We were figuring out how to build products and applications slowly. Then we realized we had this security problem. We had to figure out how to get our applications through accreditation processes and into the field with security in mind. So the first thing we did, we moved security as far to the left as humanly possible. We got rid of the kind of throat-over-the-wall security we had of the past, and we started bringing security into our normal process using as much automation as possible, security tooling, and we made it a first-class citizen. We had to make sure that our team understood the risk of security working in this space as well. Once our software developers, a lot of them we hired from industry or weren't really used to the DoD, once they recognized they were in a cyber war every single day, it made it very clear that they had to focus on security from the jump, and it became a regular part of our culture from an engineering practice. But sometimes those things aren't enough, and we needed some help. Should have spent more time. We got a video. All right. So sometimes you need some help. So we worked with Lauren Knossenberger from the staff CIO's office in order to help us get through some other bureaucratic challenges. She helped us get the first continuous ATO in the DoD. That's what working with Lauren felt like. You go through the same level, you just get to go a little bit faster sometimes. So go find yourself a Lauren, find yourself a champion that can help you get through some of these things when you need to. So we figured out the technical part of this for the most part. Now we looked around and realized we had to really fix our culture. We had to figure out how to change the way that we thought about product and thought about people and really move the needle on what our culture could be as an organization. So Google did a study a few years ago called Project Aristotle, where they went out and they sought what makes our teams effective within the company, what makes our teams not as effective. And what they came back through were 5 key principles where all of their effective teams had similar characteristics. And the first 4 are here: structure, discipline, meaning, and impact. All teams want this from an engineering perspective. And as DoD people and defense people, if you look at these 4 things, they should seem very clear to you. These are like DoD ethos. This is military ethos right here, right? We love structure. We love discipline. We have meaning in our work. We want to make an impact. Structure, from that perspective, is clearly having the military sense. We work in a model of extreme programming, test-driven development. We work in a balanced team model that's very focused. A structured model, it's disciplined. And we have meaning in our job, right? We're trying to revolutionize the future of air warfare. I was in San Francisco recently, walking down the street, and there was this billboard on the side of the road, and it was for this app that makes you optimize your dog walking route so your dog could pee on grass, which is a really good idea. And that company can pay software engineers more than I can most of the time. But when they go home at the end of the day and talk about what they did at work, I like that my engineers can go home and say that they're revolutionizing the future of air warfare rather than revolutionizing the future of pet urination or something. So we have that going for us. From an impact perspective, these guys are making an impact every day. We have plenty of engineers who come from the traditional defense industrial base who've also been stuck in the same bureaucratic system that our government has been in, and have yet to see, or it's hard for them to see their code actually get into users' hands and get that user feedback loop. It's like dopamine, right? Our ability to continuous deliver makes our engineers feel real impact in their work. But the 5th one, and the number 1 thing that came out of Project Aristotle, was this idea of psychological safety, the idea that you can feel creative and free to ideate, that your ideas aren't going to get shut down. And this one is diametrically opposed in a lot of ways to traditional military culture. We have a hierarchical nature and a top-down structure that's like imperative to success in the battlefield, not a way to build really good software, though. So we had to figure out how to work within the DoD, within this military environment, and grow the psychological safety of our teams. So we did that a few different ways. The first thing we did was work in this balanced team model of the flat management structure that allowed us to have people make decisions where the context lied, regardless of where they existed within the hierarchy. And we took all of our military people and took their uniforms off. They all wear civilian clothes at work. We have a badgeless environment in our lab, so we have mixed teams. They're balanced with contractors and active duty military and civilians. And if you walk through, you can't tell who they are, except for some bellies and beards. So that was our big focus, was to make sure that we had psychological safety in order to move the needle from a creative perspective and build really great products. So we can't do any of that unless we know what we're going to build, either work with our stakeholders to fix the requirements process, right? We can't be given a list of specs down to the color of the drop-down and expect to build really great products. We had to use user-centered design. We had to figure out how to bring UX into this process. So we went back with our stakeholders to try to tackle this requirements process that we found ourselves in. And the first thing that we realized, we had to focus on outcomes over output. We wanted to be focused on when we delivered software, it changed the world in some way. We wanted to find the positive behavioral change that your software brings into the world and start measuring that. And the great thing about tracking outcomes is that they're inherently and objectively measurable, right? What did we do yesterday from an outcomes perspective? What do we do tomorrow? We can see where our software had an impact on that. And that's what we wanted to focus on. We no longer wanted to figure out what our output was. The output you drive out of your work has no direct correlation to value, so we wanted to focus on value first. Product leader Jeff Patton said at the end of the day, your job isn't to get the requirements right, your job is to change the world, and we try to live that every single day. We want to make sure what we're building actually moves the needle from an outcome perspective. Some of the ways we do that, one, Section 804 program, so we do get some leniency from the JSIDS process. We try to use value stream mapping. We talked earlier from an organizational self-awareness perspective about to get to your target condition, you need to understand your current condition. We try to get our acquisitions people and our product people to really understand the work that they're taking on and make sure they understand how their users actually interact with software, how their workflows actually go. And we map that out so we have a really good understanding of the current state of the world. Then we can use impact mapping or other tools to see where we want that target condition to be. We know it. We know what today looks like, what do we want tomorrow to look like, and what's our path to get there. And to do all that, we need to have a strong level of transparency. So we've implemented growth boards, something we stole from the VC world. Some enterprise companies are starting to use these as well, to make sure that we are using our money and our resources in the most valuable way. So on a quarterly basis, all of our teams go to an executive growth board where they have to actually talk about the value they're delivering based on outcomes and metrics in the field. And then we can make decisions on whether we want that team to continue on to make sure we don't have zombie projects just taking on all this funding and continue on to get entitlement funding just because they exist. Last thing on there, take tests with you. We had to figure out operational tests as well in this new construct, right? Traditionally, we'd build for 5 years. We'd send it over to an independent test organization. They'd confirm that we actually deliver the requirements, get it into the field. That's not going to work for us anymore in a continuous delivery world. So we started implementing our testers into the process early on to get their input, and they can help us navigate some of the open questions we have to make sure they're confident with what we're putting into the field and putting into production. Measurable outcomes matter. So we have all this, and we live within this acquisition system, and we had to figure out how we could navigate it, how we could break down the barriers that we need to make sure that our acquisitions, teams, and personnel moved right along with us from the product perspective. But we fell into this system, right? This is the world that we live in, not very agile in and of itself. So we did a few things here. Traditionally, we measure ourselves on this iron triangle: cost, schedule, and performance. Except it's not cost compared to the value you're delivering, or schedule in terms of deployment frequency, or performance in terms of how efficient you are at delivering. Cost, schedule, performance compared to the plan you put together in the beginning. Acquisitions professionals normally judge on how good you are at building a plan and following along with it. And we inherently know that that's not going to be, that's not the way to deliver the products that we need. So we want to do lean everything. Our acquisitions team in our lab, they sit in the same space that our product teams do. They have the same equipment. They use the same rituals for the most part. They are just as lean as the rest of our product teams. And if you can talk to some of them are here in the room today and find out what they're doing. Yeah, there you go, Lorianne, Hannah. They are really changing the game on how to do acquisitions and how to take lean principles and put them into this kind of large bureaucratic process. We've got awesome results out of it. Then we get to talent management. Now we need people to do the job, and we have to figure out how to grow them and do all the things you need to do from a cultural perspective. And there are 4 parts of that: recruiting, hiring, growing, and then retaining. From a recruiting perspective, we have done a lot here to make sure that we are going out and getting talent. And when I say that, I don't just mean industry. There's a ton of talent within the DoD already that we've just misutilized and not taken advantage of for decades upon decades. In fact, the 3DOX4 career field, we have software programmer career field in the enlisted side in the Air Force. That's gone from 4,000 down to 400 over the last 10 years. Everybody else in the world is going the other direction. So we figured out how to take those folks and put them to work. Instead of having them doing SharePoint management or overseeing contractors who are writing code, we want to put them to work and be software developers again. That's what they want to do. So we're recruiting from inside the Air Force in a number of ways. One of them, Nick mentioned briefly, we have an 8 series and a 16 series special duty or secondary AFSCs within the Air Force. So we can take people who are officers or enlisted doing something other than computer science type of work. And if they have the skills, we can bring them in for an assignment and they can PCS to us and do the work in-house at Kessel Run. We're also recruiting externally. We want to bring industry talent in to kind of give us different perspectives and diverse schools of opinion. So we're recruiting in a lot of ways to do that as well. From a hiring perspective, we've done a ton of work to try to break down the barriers that make hiring last forever. If you find somebody that's talented from industry, they probably have multiple offers at this point. They're not going to wait around for us 8.5 months to get them onboarded into a government civilian position. So we've done a few things with AFPC, the Air Force Personnel Center, and our lead command to have hiring events. We've done 2 this year. One in January, we hired 34 government civilians in a single day. And in August, we did the same thing. It was like somewhere in the 30s as well for that. And that has helped us move the needle. Basically, all of the people who are charged with signing one part of a piece of paper within the process, we brought into our building and made them do it in a single day around a table. So we were able to kind of get one person actually swore in a single day. She got hired in 6 hours from interview to being a government employee. Yeah. Then we got to grow all these people, right? So now we focus a lot of time on making sure that we have growth tracks for folks so we can build them both on the military side and the civilian side. We want to make sure that we have places for these people to get the skills they need and continue to grow. Right now, there isn't that much opportunity within the system for people to kind of PCS into these other organizations, but there should be. Right now, we have about 6 of the software factory type of organizations who are doing this type of work. We need to get to a place where we can start moving these people around and have it being part of their normal career field to be software developers and engineers going forward. But we've done a lot of work here to make sure that we are providing relevant skills for all active duty folks. Sometimes it amounts to them leaving. We had some folks leave just recently who left the Air Force and are working at Atlassian and Microsoft and Amazon. We've also had it the other way where they've stayed in and they have gone on to places like Section 31 and Bespin and Space Camp and Level Up and help start those programs. So we're starting to see the kind of work we've put into growing these people spread out around the Air Force and the DoD. Then from a retainment perspective, part of it is kind of what I just mentioned around making sure they have opportunities elsewhere. We have talent in the Air Force. We just need to have environments for them to succeed in. So we want to really focus on that. And people will stay in the Air Force to continue to do this mission. And we have some data to prove that. So we want to make sure we build environments for growth so people can stay in the military, stay serving, and going on to do that. And if they don't, we have to be okay with it. Every civilian that we hire is not going to be in the government for 20 years, and we have to be okay with that. Let them come in, do a tour of duty, do some service, do 2 years, and go work somewhere else. We should be happy about that and kind of embracing those folks as well. And always be recruiting. KesselRun.af.mil if anybody's looking. All right, number 8, metrics. So we do all this good work, put all this product in the field. How do we know we're actually doing a good job? We have to measure it. And again, we don't want to go back to cost, schedule, and performance. That's not how we measure value. We also don't measure value on things like source lines of code or velocity or stories or features. These are vanity metrics that don't have any correlation to value delivery whatsoever, these things don't actually matter at all. So if you're tracking these things in your organization, just don't anymore, because you're not actually getting anything out of it. Things that we use, there's a bunch of different tools you can use. We use OKRs for organizational alignment to make sure we always know what a priority is. This helps you say no to things, which is really great. We do what we call a product one metric that matters. This is the outcome we're trying to achieve from a product perspective that we want to continuously keep our eye on. And then software delivery performance metrics. Basically, I focus on two things. How efficient are we being as an IT or a DevOps organization, and counter that with the outcomes that we're delivering in the field in a measurable way. Those two things mean we're having really good results. From a software delivery perspective, these are the things that we track. Deployment frequency, lead time, mean time to restore, change fail rate, and availability. There are tempo metrics and throughput metrics here that allow us to pay attention to how successful we're being, not just as a software development organization, but as a deployment and operations organization. So we continuously have these in dashboards and make sure that we're continuously improving here. We need to make sure we're measuring what matters. And then the backlash comes. This basically feels like my life right now. I had a whole different talking point for this slide, but friend of DEF, Dan Ward, wrote an article yesterday that compared Kessel Run's rise to John Travolta's career. Did anybody read this? It was pretty awesome. Yeah. So basically what he said is that the hype has gotten so big, similar to John Travolta's career, that the trough of delusion or disillusionment is coming. And my first comment to that was I thought I was already in that. So I was kind of bummed to hear that I wasn't. That means it's coming. Yeah, so I mean, we have had a lot of success here, but the hype has probably got out ahead of us a little bit. So we want to make sure that we're always maintaining the things that have made us successful, being as humble as possible, and continuing to deliver in the face of kind of uncertainty and disillusionment. So the two things I would focus on here are humility and results. If you deliver, you can get through all of those things. So just continue to do that. Which takes us to level 10. Evolution and growth. So we are a continuous growth organization. We continuously evolve. We've had 3 vision statements in the last year and a half. Some people would say that's a problem. I think it's evolution. I don't know. Maybe I'm just kind of selling that a little bit. But we want to make sure we're continuing to grow. I love this quote by Admiral John Richardson, the CNO. He said, "It's about the team that brings the people, the technology, and the processes together to learn the fastest. That's the team that has the advantage." And I love this quote for a long time, and I worked with Brian for a while, and he made me realize that I was paying attention to the wrong part of this quote for a long time. I was like, all right, people, technology, processes. I got to get those 3 things right. It's actually this last part that's important to learn the fastest, to make sure that all these things that we're doing, we're continuing to learn from and continuously improving on to continue to improve and deliver capability. So we had this software factory, and we had to figure out how to kind of share these lessons learned around the Air Force, around the DoD. We were not the first software factory in the military to do this stuff. We're not the best one. We're just the loudest in a lot of ways. But a lot of that is strategic. So one of the problems that we have here is that this only works. This new way of thinking and working only works if we're completely transparent about what we're doing and we're completely open and honest about it. But until this becomes a normal way of working and a normal way of thinking, your transparency can be weaponized against you. So one thing that we keep doing is being as open and talking about this way of working as much as possible. That way we can be as open and transparent. People can see the value that we're delivering, and we can be honest about it. And we're only going to do that if we all work together to continue down this road as an organization, so that we can take what we've learned here in this game the last couple of years and translate it into real life. Oh, that was about to be so good. Thank you. I think I have time for questions. Yeah? Cool. Sure.
I have 2 questions, if you don't mind. The first one is, you had mentioned that 3 of the 5 people came when Kessel Run started from operational and technical backgrounds. As you guys have grown to 1,000 people or so, what's the breakdown of that? How have you kind of kept that operational focus? And then the second question, if you don't mind, is, if you were to suggest to another service trying to build this kind of a software factory, or maybe even another country that's working on it, this is a great roadmap of what to do. What do you think is the best lesson for what to avoid? What kind of failure would you say, don't repeat it? Thanks.
Sure. I think I'll start with the second one. The most important thing is that you actually have to understand the work here. You can't just get like a recipe or a playbook and do it on the surface. So Max Planck is this German physicist in the early 1900s, right? And he used to travel around and do all these speeches on quantum theory around Europe. And his chauffeur would drive him around, and he'd go into all the speeches and listen from the back. And at one point, the chauffeur said, Max, at this point, I think I could just give this talk. You've done it so many times. So he's like, all right, let's do it. So they go to Madrid, and the chauffeur gives the entire talk, and it's great. And then somebody in the audience raises their hand. They ask some question on quantum theory. The chauffeur has no idea, so he says to the good people of the good people of Munich, I can't believe you'd bother me with such a simple question. I'm going to have my chauffeur answer it for you. And the idea there is chauffeur knowledge. You can't just like do the rituals, cargo culting, and make sure you have to actually learn the work and the reason why we're doing things. So all of the things on here were thousands of hours of work and a bunch of failing and a bunch of crying in a corner and working 90 hours a week. People have to be prepared for that. So I would just say that first. On the first one, it's really hard. So we live in the acquisitions community, so it's really hard to make sure we're continuing to have that operational perspective. We do a few things there. We bring people in to work with us from the field as much as possible. We do a lot of 6-month TDYs when we get people from the field who've done the job, and they sit in our office. We don't use them as users, but we use them as from perspective to keep us honest. And we do a ton of user research. So our folks are constantly going overseas and sitting with users and interviewing to make sure that we're keeping up with that. But it is really, really hard, especially in our lab. We have a lab in downtown Boston that looks nothing like a military or government building. So it's easy for people to lose sight of what we're doing every day. So we try to do what we can to make sure that it's very obvious, but it's difficult. Yeah.
Hi, Rashad Howard. You said you work with stakeholders to fix the requirements problem. I'm interested in you describing what is the requirements problem and how you define a requirement.
What is the problem? That was easy. So traditionally, we would get requirements handed to us, and then we would have to kind of build them to a T before getting them into production. By the time that would happen, the world changed a bunch. And what we're building is not what we needed in the first place, and the requirements are usually drafted by people who don't actually understand the work. So there's a bunch of problems there. We have had really good stakeholders, to be honest, who are open to like experimenting with the way that we worked. So that's been really great. So we basically get focused to a particular area right now, and then we use our UCD process and our product teams to dive in and get those like kind of little R requirements, if you will, to make sure that we are tackling them. So that's kind of like done for us from that perspective. The problem it doesn't solve is like congressional budgeting still. I still can't go to Congress and say like, all right, I want $100 million for this level of capacity. I promise I'll deliver you value, right? Because I don't know what I'm going to build yet. So we still have the problem of connecting the dots between how we work from a day-to-day perspective and like translating that to people who just want to like pay you money and get a tangible thing in return. So we still haven't kind of crossed that bridge yet. Yeah.
Like Fortune 100 companies have internal arms. Do you guys do internal consulting within you in software factories?
Unofficially, for sure. We've tried to do our best to kind of give back to a lot of those organizations. Actually, the acquisitions folks have done a ton of work lately. I know Hannah and Lorianne have gone down to like Level Up as an example and help with their acquisition strategy and some lessons learned there. Actually, a lot of them kind of have borrowed from our contracts altogether to deliver in that way. And yeah, I think we still keep up from a product perspective with all of those folks. A lot of the, I think at every software factory right now, there's somebody in some kind of leadership position that came out of Kessel Run. So we have like a pretty good network that's kind of growing more informally though than anything.
Building on that, could you talk about maybe how is Kessel Run helping to shape and spread this capability to like industry partners, other organizations within DoD and stuff, some the relationships that are being built, not necessarily through these formal channels, but also through the formal ones too?
Yeah, a few. I mean, I think just by existing, we're doing a lot of that. So I will say early on, our original vision statement was to revolutionize the way the Air Force worked, right? Then we had one about we wanted to build a software company in the Air Force to change. And I think at some point we like opened our eyes and we were a product organization. We were like, okay, we're doing all this kind of process stuff and we're like, oh shit, we got all these products in the field that users are using right now. So I do think that we have slowed down a bit on kind of that outreach lately on purpose to make sure we were focused. But we're doing a bunch of industry days as an example on the acquisition side to work with our industry partners. We're trying to target non-traditional companies to try to open up the aperture of who's bidding on work. And I mean, we do a lot of talks, so I don't know, that's part of it too. But I will say that maybe just me personally, I've like kind of been really kind of focused on from a delivery perspective in the last year or so, just nature of what we're doing. Good. Thanks, Mike.